Your cell phone is turned off. Where you left it? Oh, my closet. See my coat? It's a walk-in closet, too, isn't it? Yeah, I can probably climb out. Tragedy. Yeah, so, yeah. So just look this, almost here.
Oh, the official internet time.
Is Century gonna be call it?
No,
She said no.
Hello?
oh, we can hear you.
Good. This is Stephen Yet calling. How is everyone?
Say that name again, please.
Stephen, last name Yet, Y-E-T-T.
Oh, good. You're the applicant for the Windjammer.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. We didn't know.
We don't have a picture. Are you ready to record?
I'm going to ask if the red one is in, you're like, "Ah."
Good question.
I thought it was. Oh, I am dangerous.
No, I'm right next to you.
I know, you get yourself, okay. It's 6 o'clock, I call to order the July 14th Earhart Planning Commission meeting. First, we need to take care of the excused absence for Judy Shefter. Do I have a motion to excuse her from this meeting?
So move.
Russ has moved. Do I have a second? Judy, I'm sorry, Sharon seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Other commissioners are here. Consent agenda. Those are the minutes from June 9th, financial report, and correspondence. Is there any discussion? Yes, Judy. I'm sorry, Sharon. I'm sorry.
Call me whatever you want to do.
No, that's not good.
I think in the minutes, we might be missing Terry's comments under the discussion with commissioners, the first part.
That's why I asked those questions. I wanted to.
Right. That's not in, but anyway.
Oh, they don't have to. I think the comment, I mean, we want to talk about land use attorney. Is that what you're talking about today, or were there other questions?
Well, I had 3 questions that I wanted the city attorney to address. And I haven't seen anywhere that they've been addressed, so I want to raise those again tonight.
Okay.
One of them I'm really concerned about moving forward.
Okay. All right, so go ahead.
Good point. I think that's right. They need to be
added.
repeated or?
I don't know, but I don't remember what they are, sorry.
Well, this is what came up, and it had to do with the division from one lot into 3 lots. And one of the adjoining landowners was saying that this would be a burden on the easement, that changing it from 1 to 3. And my main concern was, when we have these applications come before us, Carol gives us this 8, 9, 10 page where she goes through each thing that they need to hit, and then has the findings and says it's okay, or their permits or their conditions or whatever. And this raised an issue of this easement, which was really between the 2 neighbors, that wasn't addressed in Carol's report. And my question is something like that is raised, is that something that we can take into consideration when we're making our decision? And is this a legitimate, would that have been a legitimate reason to deny the application? Because I see this as the possibility it's a dispute between 2 landowners. It's a private dispute. Is it 2 burdens, and one could file a lawsuit and the other one could respond and the court could decide it? But is that something that we could have taken into consideration? Because if we denied it because we thought it was an overburden of the easement, and then he appealed it, with the court find that's not a legitimate reason, that has nothing to do with what you're doing. And I can see this moving forward as these different partitions come up and that sort of thing. What actually are we able to consider, and what is a legitimate reason to deny something? Did I just say, yeah, I don't like the guy, I'm going to deny it?
Can you state your questions succinctly for Angeline, so we can put them in the minutes?
Well, can I ask you a question, Mrs.
Yes.
President? This is part of the hearing that's been continued.
Yes,
now. So I suggest we not do that right now, because I think we can go back to the recording and get your comments
okay,
put into the revised minutes. And then we will be talking about this, because we
Okay.
did ask for his opinion, plus we got one from the owner of the joint property.
okay. But I think this is something that we're gonna run into more.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, we don't often, but we did.
We did, and I think we're going to more.
so let's move ahead with the consent agenda. And Angelina will, I mean, because everyone spoke to Terry, and that doesn't make sense at all. So.
Nobody listens to me.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the revised minutes that Angelina will put together with Terry's questions?
In which case you may not want to approve the minutes.
Not approve the minutes at this point, wait till August?
Wait.
You want to wait? Okay. Then we'll just approve the financial report. We have no correspondence. Do I have a motion to approve the financial report?
I move to approve the financial report
Okay.
and, yeah, everything but the minutes.
Everything but the minutes. We will, Russ will be in charge in August and he will take care of that. That's right. So Russ has moved. Do I have a second?
Second,
Terry seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed say nay. All right, the staff report. Is there anything today, Carol?
I'll turn that over to Chad, see if there's anything new.
Just a couple quick things, as you probably already know, Councillor Carrie Smith has become Mayor Carrie Smith with the approval of the council, appointment of the council. And also a new councillor was appointed to take his position, which is Councillor Dana Gold. She's got experience in law enforcement and project development and resiliency. So it'll be interesting to see her on there. But, so far, everything's positive. Good. You see a little bit of the park excavation across the street. That is starting. We feel that we're getting closer. You know, people that put the park together that are certified to help us with this are kind of stretched thin a little bit right now. We think we're in the queue for the beginning of August, the middle of August. So once we know, we will go out for a volunteer effort to help with that. Should be fun. Great. Something to enjoy. That's all I got for now.
Okay, thank you. Angelina, do you have anything for us tonight? No. We have a goals list. Is there any additions, corrections, concerns? I had one second line there, fire station site, UGV SWAT / annexation / zone change. Does that still belong on our goals list?
So far, the council has not made any recommendations to that, so I will leave it as it is for now.
I did have some, I think it is goal list appropriate, and it addresses what Terry just was describing, that we keep running into these partition subdivision where it's just the original development is a driveway. Subsequent developments are, you know, are fraught with poor road access, of poorly defined road access. I'm wondering if we need to rewrite our whatever zoning section, put that on this list to rewrite whatever part of our legislation would address that more specifically. You know, we had it in Romine, we had it on East Pine Road, we had it on Grand Mark. You know, it just seems like, and Terry's suggesting that keeps coming up, which I don't disagree with. And that seems like, why don't we codify it rather than just fight it?
May I respond?
Of course you can.
If you look at the goals list, item 3 on the far left column says items, go down to 3. And for a long time, we've had rewrite and update subdivision ordinance on our goals list. So that it definitely needs to happen, but I would also say the ordinance that we have was not adhered to in many prior decisions.
Oh.
And that is why we've ended up with some of the situations you've described.
Okay, well, yeah, if it's properly defined, then I say adhere, adhere and enforce. If it's not properly defined, we should do so.
Yeah, and I mean, we can move this, looks like we don't even have a priority listing for it. We can, if you'd like to move that up to talk about this topic, let alone maybe rewrite the ordinance. We all know what it says. And I think that'd be an interesting exercise anyway, because what you'll find is the ordinance is pretty strict about streets, for instance. And for some reason, over the years, city officials were convinced that they didn't need to require full streets or full widths or pavement. And sometimes it has to do with the physical circumstances, particularly on the east side where everything's a dead end, just about, because the railroad firm and right away. And so those partitions happen over time. And I think you find some of the correspondence about the partition we're talking about tonight, again, is some things should be required the first partition, not the second or third. Because you can't go back and necessarily very easily.
No, I understand
And
that.
that's because that was the way the city decisions work more often that way back in the past. So it's a good test that we're up against, and hopefully we're following the code now. But we'll talk about that some more tonight and then your case. And if you want to move the priority to something else or give it one, it's been on my list for a long time, but when you get to it, what would you like to do with this?
Well, let's make it a priority too, and I would like to just have a, if we ever have a meeting where we're not, having
Public
things, hearings presented to us, and if we look at it and say, and we all agree it's properly written, or we disagree and tighten it up. So make it as number 2 is fine with me. Or
Anyone else?
Did we excuse Judy?
No, we did that at the very beginning. I always do that before we get into it, so we have the attendance and everything set.
Can I ask something people?
Oh,
Not
yeah.
add, but I mean, just comment.
Yes.
So John offered to help rewrite or write a summary of the comprehensive plan with me.
Mhm.
And that was a priority or something, what is it? Can't see it right now.
It's down the very bottom, last item.
Draft a statement summarizing the vision of the comprehensive plan for distribution. And that was a council suggestion in their work session a while back. And this is a great offer, and we haven't gotten to it yet. But we had an idea.
Oh, really?
This is for educational purposes. It's not necessarily a pressing thing, but it's a good idea. It's a really good idea. I'd like to give a shot at it. And not wait for me,
Right.
and then we'll work collaboratively to work on it some more.
Right, come up with a first draft,
Yeah,
the summary,
yeah,
absolutely.
really?
Yeah.
Nailed it. Good. And then the other thing is the elk. We have had a little bit of recent suggestions that we take that on as maybe our next, maybe more pressing issue, or take some action on it, or begin to talk about it more, because we have quite a list of steps that we should be taking based on our agreement with the other jurisdictions. What's it called again? Cooperative agreement.
Yeah, the, until you asked, I had it in my head.
Yeah,
Declaration of cooperation.
With Warrenton, the county, Astoria, Seaside, everybody's signed off on this long list of steps to take to mitigate the dangers, the inconveniences, the problems with the elk. And that we thought might be something we take on next, besides the summary.
So what's our part in that?
Well, again, was it on here?
There's things within the declaration, oh, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's some things within the declaration of cooperation that all the states are working on, including the state, including Department of Fish and Wildlife, and landowners around. And so we do have a list of recommendations of things we should look at, and I'll give an example of the fence ordinance. Take a look at the fence ordinance one more time, run it through the idea of protecting or keeping elk out, and it was have that discussion. And so there's tasks within that plan, and we can send that to you as well. So, yeah, it'd be nice to work on some of the, and I've said this a couple times, just start with some low hanging fruit. Kind of get accustomed to what the plan is about and maybe take care of something that's easy.
The fence.
That was a bad example. Bad example on the fence.
I don't know if you were here, we had the fence discussion for months. and
Yeah.
months and months.
Thank you.
Well, that's just something to keep in the back. of the mind.
Okay, so what would you call it? Are you going to add it?
Well,
Are
right
you-
now, there's already something that might incorporate it.
The wildlife?
Evaluate wildlife habitat protection and restoration standards. And elk would fall, elk management or elk mitigation or whatever it's gonna be, could fall in there. And we could give it a higher priority. Doesn't, has a low one right now. If you want to think about it, we'll talk about it next month. You know, what are our highest priorities right now? Right now it's the fire station and that's on hold, so we don't have any ones.
No.
Except the summary of the plan.
With the ODOT, that's ongoing.
Yeah, but we're not doing that.
Doesn't have much to do with
State's
us.
doing
yeah.
it pretty much, so they'll go to council for adoption, but you're right, that's one, because
But it's ongoing, it's in the process.
it's
already.
almost over.
Right.
Right.
So, why don't you, look at your wordage there, verbiage, and if you need to, I think that you're talking about something, mitigation and protection, they aren't necessarily this interchangeable words. So, why don't you come up with some, a little more detail and some words for us, and we can put it on.
Okay, maybe it'll just be a separate item.
It can be separate, it may need to be a separate item.
Thank you.
Anything else? Staff? Commissioners? Okay. Let's move on then. Visitors' comments. These are things that any visitors would like to talk about that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that just has something else on their mind that they want to share with the planning commission? Okay. What's that? All right. So we have the land use application discussion continuation from June. I am going to reopen the public hearing on 22-04P HHB Cutler partition application on Cutler Lane. Thank you. An application for approval of a minor land partition to divide one parcel into three on a parcel located on a private street in Cutler Lane in a medium density residential R2 zone. We will also be having a public hearing tonight on 2205 CU Windjammer conditional use application. I'm going to read the disclosure statement again. It will cover for both of them. So if you have something to declare on the second one, you can do it all at one time. All persons testifying shall be deemed parties to the application and must provide their name and full mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision, continuances, appeals, or other procedural actions required by the code. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony shall be limited to those criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient details to afford the hearing body and parties to the hearing an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the city council or land use board of appeals or to seek damages in circuit court due to condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the planning commission for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence, arguments, or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The hearings body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence, argument, or testimony pursuant to ORS 197.763(6)A through E. Commissioners, do you have any conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or personal bias? Yes.
I had contact with Mr. Cooter of CKI, 2 conversations regarding this. And I also had a brief email exchange with Mr. Evans to discuss it, but we never actually did. That did not continue.
So you don't have any new information to share with us then?
No.
No. Okay, I did go by the windjammer and drove around it because I wanted to see the picture of what I was seeing doesn't look exactly the same, so I figured it out, so. The audience, are there any challenges to the commission's ability to make an impartial decision? I'm going to go to staff for we are reopening this public hearing. We have new evidence. So there will be, because of the new evidence for the proponents and opponents to speak tonight. Carol.
Thank you. Just to get us all on the same page with all the paper, of course, you have the map of the partition from last time. And then what would have followed that and the timeline would have been the 21st. That's minor comment. Now, the June 30th letter from Abby Germain, representing Mr. Evans, Mr. Brian Evans, the property owner of the 2 parcels west of the subject site. And we had that last week. And then along with that, would be in addition to my staff report from the first hearing, but it's really focused on where we are now and what the issues were. So we'll go over that in a minute. And then today we have 2 comments that came in. Another one from API Properties, July 14th. Should have that. And a July 14th email from that we forwarded to you from Scott of CKI after questioning asking him a question the legal status of the easement and if it could become a road. Okay. Sorry they come so late, but okay, so we reopened hearing and I'm just gonna look at my report here again on the memorandum dated July 8th. I think we all know where we stand. and the letters, I think there's also emails in here from, if they're not in here, they're in my report from the city attorney, Peter Watts. And that's quoted here in my report. So, you know, taking the original staff report aside, and really what we're focusing on, I think, or why we continued the hearing is because of the road and the legal status of an easement. Shouldn't it be a full road, and can you divide it again, and so on. And so the city attorney said initially it was a road, a recorded easement. It's a road and utility easement. And it doesn't preclude further land division, but he says it seems like they will need to build it up to code, the street standards that would be required for normally in our subdivision ordinance. And again, I don't see a deed restriction, and the plat clearly shows a road easement. So those were his brief reply to the question of what is the easement and can it be modified and who's affected? And can we require paving and dedication? And I think also what would be, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one thing, the minutes from the original land division in 2005 of this piece of property was also researched by the staff. And I'll talk about that right in a second. You know, I had a question to the surveyor a couple weeks ago. It says, have you ever seen an easement with an intent for future use? And that a deed restriction would have been done, but because we don't have one, he said, I think we would have to go with what the zoning allows. So that's quoted on page 1 there. In the original partition in 05, the city approved it. And I'm just going to jump to some conclusions here. With this easement for road and utility purposes only. And although it may not have been the Cutler's intent at that hearing last month, city staff said in the report that the R, you know, reminded the R2 zone permits further land division because of the zoning. And does the status of the existing easement prohibit that zoning allowance? It really is what we've come down to. But in the staff report and the minutes in 2005, when the Cutlers asked for this to be originally divided from one parcel into 3, they said, well, if you can divide these 2 rear parcels in the future based on the zoning, but since they're not, we won't require the road improvement, which I do believe the subdivision ordinance would have required at that time in 05. But you'll have to do it later when you try and divide it again. And that turns out to be a very difficult decision that they made now, because as said by the surveyor, as said by me in my report, as said by our own subdivision ordinance, if you don't require these things in the first land division, here we are 17 years later, whatever it is, and time to do it now with no clear legal way to do it. And though the council and the planning commission at the time said, you know, you have to do it later. Here we are later, and the code says you can divide it, but is the road adequate? The input from Ms. Germain and Mr. Evans' first letter was a petition will not allow for all 3 lots to abut a street, and city staff report stated it does not address how this partition satisfies that condition. Although the 2005 partition did not meet city standards, she said the city correctly platted this area in the past and is not allowable or documented at that time that it could be done later. So the commission now must deny this partition based on the failure to meet criteria 40.2, requiring each lot shall abut a street other than an alley for a width of 25 feet. Well, we found that the partition provides 25 feet of frontage. True. To each of the 3 subject lots by extending the easement from its current terminus to the 2 new parcels as shown on this. However, the city now knows in 05 the Cutler Lane should be dedicated as a public street and paved in the event of further development that complies with the R2 zone standards. That's where that seemed to be, that's where that has led us now. So is it a street and was it legal? It's a street, but the subdivision ordinance said you had to pave it then. You should have, so you should have required it, and it wasn't done. And so the attorney for Mr. Evans is saying, well, you can't go complete, you can't continue to allow this if you did it wrong in the first place, right? And so now we're up against the problem of we have different ownerships on the property. We have Mr. Evans who owns the first 2 and the applicant who owns the last piece. And the question becomes, can you make the owner of the first 2, does that person, Mr. Evans, have to agree to dedicate it with his signature and record it with the county as now a public street? And then require them to pave it. That's where it's either that or accept it the way it was done then and say, well, the zoning allows it, so you get to have those lots, and that's the quandary we're in. It should have been paid before. The 3 lots on her letter are irrelevant. The character of the land is another possible way to approach this in terms of having to decide. And that is the plan, if you find that this property is unsuitable for subdivision or partitioning due to flooding, improper drainage, steep slopes, adverse soil conditions, or topography, utility easements, or other features which would reasonably be harmful to the safety, health, and general welfare of the present or future inhabitants of the subdivision or partition and its surrounding area, then it shall not be partitioned unless adequate methods are formulated by the developer and approved by the planning commission to solve those unsuitable, unsafe, dangerous problems, conditions. And you know, we talked about that last time. You raised concerns about this steepness of the slope on lot 3, the possible drainage issues, the removal of trees, and soil stabilization for that 3rd lot in the back. And soil stabilization, where was that when I heard that noise? Sorry, that's okay. And surrounding environment, the lack of a geotechnical report. And so at least you got so far as to say that trees number 2 and 5 should at least be saved. And then we stopped at that point. These are issues that should be raised and have been raised. And yet, you know, the details of drainage and slope are typically, this is not trying to push this off, but you have to consider them, but some of these things are not addressed until the building permit is filed for a house. Because then you see what type of construction is going on, what the impact of the house, what's the size, how it's affecting the land. And, you know, the applicant in a partition phase is not necessarily at that point because they don't have the lot yet. It hasn't been partitioned legally. And so they don't necessarily go to the extent of defining the building plan other than the envelope that it's allowed to be in, and how it might affect drainage and how they would address drainage based on those plans. And it's interesting that you had a chance to see Park Lane. It's a mirror image practically, what it is, where they got into the dune, they reshaped the dune, and that, the details, the geotech, I believe, and the slope on that one was, we think, 1-to-1, which is a steeper slope than this plan. This is a 2-to-1 slope. So you're going 2 feet in before you go up, instead of 1 foot in before you go up. And so this is an improved topographical change to the site than Park Lane. But it was approved with the retaining wall on Park Lane. That all happened after, well after the land division. So it's the cart before the horse, which, you know, how far do we go with these questions? But, you know, the character of the land, are these unsuitable? Are they unsafe? Are they harmful? Will they, you know, is somebody gonna get hurt? What's the future of the inhabitants here? You know, do you have evidence, which I don't think there's evidence to show there will be harmful impacts to the inhabitants of these 3 houses. Then the question of the Evans first letter was may not be used as a street according to the by the proposed partition is the last thing that came on the letter from Mr. Maine that you got a while ago, and I can quickly go over the new ones. The scope can't be expanded beyond the original intent of the grantor of the easement, and the original purpose of the easement was what it was granted for. In construing an easement, the task is to discern the nature and scope of the easement's purpose and intent. And then before legal case citations were provided and how that was true. So staff replies, the intent of assuring no future development on Cutler Lane by the prior owner was not presented with the application or found in the 2005 Cutler partition decision. Typically, a land use intent is addressed in the land covenant at the time of the land division decision to assure it's enforced. And evidence has not been provided that the intent from 17 years ago was codified or otherwise made effective by a code covenant or restriction. And I just finished by saying, you know, it would be hard to imagine development inside Oregon's urban growth boundaries, which are intended to be urbanized and are very clear, strong, strict goals to maximize efficient development on our urban land. And if you would, every time somebody tried to develop, you went back to somebody's original intent, it was not codified or recorded, that they were ever planning to allow that to be developed. I mean, that would completely blow apart the entire land use system in Oregon, because there's nothing here to say that that intent is the final word, basically. So there's a tentative staff recommendation in the memo. And we're focusing on condition number 3. In 2005, the Cutler Lane partition approval, the city administrator Dennis McNally said if additional development were to occur, the access easement would need to be dedicated to the city as a public road and paved to city standards. Therefore, the final plat shall indicate dedication of the easement to the city as a public street. Prior to issuance of the occupancy for the first home, Cutler Lane shall be dedicated a public street paved from Highway 101 to Parcel 3 for the city street standards. Okay, well, now that's the way it was written a week ago, because, you know, we took the word of the minutes and the decision of the prior administrator that when you come back, because you can come back and turn this into 2 or 3 lots for each one of those parcels, according to the R2 zone, you have to pave the street. So we said, okay. Is that the final word? And that was July 8th. The condition is written that yes, you have to dedicate and pave the street. Now, since then, the applicant, who's represented by CKI, had a response today. And Mr. Evans had a response today about the second step. So I'm not sure which one came first, but CKI said, so we got both parties with a reply to the requirement for a street dedication and pavement. And the CKI for the applicant said the owners of the two lots are EPI properties and includes Stephen Evans. So yes, I deal with the first two lots. So yes, Mr. Evans would have to agree first to dedicate the road to the public and also agree to paving. I don't believe the city can require either of those two things, paving or dedication. For those items to be required, I believe they would have to be reported at the county clerk's office in the form of a deed restriction. However, as there is no deed restriction, I don't believe notes from the 2005 file are enforceable. My client Nathan Johnson can't dedicate property that he doesn't own or pave across the property without agreement. It would not be reasonable for Nathan to bear the entire cost of paving. The 2005 Planning Commission should have conditioned that there was a road maintenance agreement recorded at the county clerk's office and that there was a deed restriction and also recorded regarding future development and dedication and paving. It appears that those two things did not happen. I do not believe that instead of conditioning paving and dedication, Nathan would be willing to pave the apron. I do believe, I'm sorry, that instead of conditioning paving and dedication, Nathan would be willing to pave the apron as you and Chad had requested in the first meeting. And that, if you might recall, we talked about as you leave these properties to get on the highway, there's an incline and it's gravel. And so there's some skidding and trouble getting out. Sometimes you have to get out really fast. Every time you have to get out really fast, unless no one's coming. And so that we suggested last month that we pave that apron, okay? And so that's what the applicant is recommending, that you can't require the dedication, you can't require the paving. The apron's probably a good idea. And Mr. Evans said today, staff finds from current, in 2005, I submit this very clearly establishes the current easement as shown on the plat, was approved in 05 and as it exists today, as it existed when I purchased my property. Not sure when that property purchase was, but it doesn't matter. He bought the property in front and saw the easement and thinking that that was the way it was. As it existed and when the applicant purchased the property, can only support 2 parcels. Well, can that easement only support 2 parcels? There's not any evidence to that really in front of us. And I drove down several of the streets. They all have paved roads that I went on over there on the east side. They all come to a dead end. Most of them are straight. And many houses are located on those little dead ends. Do they function okay? I think so, but anyway, this one has a slightly different, although there was one on straight, turns again, and it's pretty tight. But it's a 25-foot easement and the typical road is 20-foot minimum. So you could theoretically pave a 20-foot section just to make it, least maintenance wise, but it would pretty much be like so many of those streets there are now. But the question really is legally, can the applicant be required to do that across Mr. Evans' 2 parcels? And so, in summary, he's opposed to this for the simple reason I don't believe there's adequate logistical access to support the additional lots. And I feel I presented sufficient grounds for denial. I recognize the city planning staff is supportive of the project and is recommending approval. I'd like to point out that the findings report and the proposed conditions do not address or contemplate who would bear the cost of the required road improvements to the existing easement. And I think the condition said it would be at the expense of the applicant. I'm not sure it said that. So that would be my opinion. In addition to bringing the easement to city standards and paving, there's currently an existing fire hydrant located in the approximate center of the 25-foot easement that will need to be relocated. If this ultimately is approved, I feel it should be clarified in the conditions of approval that the applicant will bear 100% of any associated costs. And he renews his request to deny it. So I think that's it. I honestly feel as a continuation, we're really focusing on the street issue for this partition. In my memo, the conditions as they all were, it's really number 3. That's the question. And maybe, well, with the things that came in today, I guess the staff hasn't had a chance to reply to that, but I would agree with CKI that I don't see how you can force them promise to pave and dedicate 17 years ago legally. It was just, it should have been done then.
Is that a legal opinion you're giving us or a planning?
No, I'm not the lawyer, so that's a planning opinion.
Okay, 'cause you said I don't think it legally can.
Sorry, you're right.
Well, you have to be careful because
you're right.
this could show up in a court somewhere on a field.
Thank you for
And
correcting me, because I'm just a
being
planner.
critical, I'm just asking if that's a planning opinion as opposed to
Well, and I would say I've never had this kind of circumstance before.
right,
So it's never been tested in my mind.
Right.
And that's why if you follow your subdivision ordinance in the first place, you wouldn't be here.
right.
And so it's tough. I think that's enough for now.
Do any of the commissioners have questions for Carol specifically about her presentation?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
And maybe this is because I'm new to this, but I'm confused about a variety of things here, and I'll just focus on 1 or 2 of them, not other things that are peripheral. First of all, just a comment before I make a question, or before I ask a question. I would agree with you. I don't think the character of the land issue is what stopped us last time we were here. I think it's all about this easement and the legal opinion about the easement and the paving issues, et cetera. So I don't think it's appropriate for me to make a motion on this. I'm just saying that I think we as a body need to focus entirely on that.
We won't have discussion right now. We got time for that, John.
Okay,
If you've got questions about it.
then I'll just ask one question.
Clarification.
Clarification. It seemed unusual to me, and this was clarification of correspondence. Perhaps, is that appropriate to ask about right now?
Sure. I mean,
So,
Unless you want to ask the applicant when they give any further testimony.
okay, that might be good.
Okay,
Yeah.
because Carol would be giving her take on it, basically.
Yeah, you're right. So I'll ask the applicant
Okay.
at that time.
Okay. Anything else, John?
Nope.
Anyone else? Yes, John.
Carol, you said that we can't enforce a promise from 2005. But can we enforce an ordinance that is present today?
yes, in a new proposal, you wouldn't force your ordinance. But when there's other property owners involved, then I think it adds a layer that's questionable legally. In other words, if it was the same property all the way out.
Right. Gotcha.
Is that,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So if a dedication has to be approved by, let's say, both parties? Or do
in
they-
this case,
Yes,
we got to think so, yes, yes, yes. That would be, that would be the right thing to do if the other party agreed. As far as getting the street the way it should have been originally.
You answered? Okay. All right, so basically we have new information tonight.
Well, I had something to ask as well.
Okay.
So McNally's statement in the 05, when I guess it was when Cutler was originally plotted, and he suggested that, I mean, what's the status of this suggestion? In 05, he says, if we do anything beyond what it's currently, how that number 3 is currently utilized, it's gonna have to be a paved road. Isn't that a statement of the city's position?
Well, I think I tried to explain that if it was required to be paved then, in 2005, for the 3 lots total that were the 2 new ones in the
Yeah.
back, and it wasn't. And they said, well, we'll make them do it later. It should have been done then, the paving and the dedication.
I thought the wording was, he was suggesting anything beyond today.
Well, he was,
Is-
but
is-
what my answer is, that's what he said.
I see.
We'll do it later.
All right.
We'll require it later. And here we are later. And now we have another owner involved. And as both CKI said, and I think I've said it somewhere else, it should, in response to Mr. Jermaine, it should have been a deed restriction. You have to get it should have been codified some way, recorded so that would carry on to the new buyers.
But how is
Mr. Evans.
McNally's declaration any different than your 10-point declaration here? Where you say, you need to have a engineer's report for the
Right.
slope lot number 3, and I mean, you have a whole list of things here that are simply the planning commission's suggestions in 2022. How is 05 any different?
That's an interesting question. I think the road dedication involving other property owners is more, raises to a different level than the rest of these.
Okay, I'm just, that's got me, I'm twitching with that one.
Yeah, well, it's difficult. This is not typical. We haven't run into this, I don't think, before, and it's a difficult situation. And I think everybody's trying to accommodate each other. Ideally, the road is paved and dedicated and will be maintained. But there are 12 private streets in Deer Park, we know of right offhand, that weren't required to be dedicated. And that, it leaves a question mark as to why and what do we do now? But I believe your subdivision ordinance requires it, but the circumstances over there are just unique. And so here we are trying to, and that's what Dennis was probably thinking in 05. Well, this is good enough for now, but we'll address it later when further land divisions come before you. But now we have another owner involved.
But aren't we also, if we approve the 3 lots and don't address the easement as far as the maintenance of it, we're just leaving that to that neighborhood to fight over who gravels it and who doesn't gravel it, and it just seems like
Right.
we're handing the problem to the future owners of that little area.
And so when we get to that point, which I guess we're getting closer, a road maintenance agreement between all those property owners would be a really good idea now.
Yeah, can we
Yes,
put that in our language?
I think if depending on where you go with the payment and the dedication versus anything else, that should be a requirement, period.
Why?
Because that would settle at least that portion. There's a cooperative agreement. There's more traffic now. Who's gonna pay for it? There's all crossing on his property to get back there. They need to participate in that, the owners.
Any other questions, Russ?
Rachel Lawson.
Okay, Sharon, you have questions for Carol?
Yes, please. So Carol, where, the CKI email, where it says the other owners of the two lots are EPI properties given Evans, so yes, Mr. Evans would have to agree first to dedicate the road to the public. You agree with that statement?
That's exactly the question I was gonna ask. I would deferred it, but
That's a legal question.
It's a legal question. I'm afraid we didn't get an answer from our attorney. And the question is, it would have to go on appeal and be resolved.
That's the best
That's kind of
answer.
our answer, isn't it?
Well, you can decide one way or the other, and if somebody doesn't like your decision, they appeal it to city council.
We can, I think it would be best if we heard from the proponents again tonight.
Yeah, well,
We
that's
have
what
the attorney
yeah.
here. And the question's totally valid. But let's go ahead and do that. I have proponents here.
I go to the applicant first and then,
That's,
oh, sorry.
thank you. They usually sit next to me and tell me what to do.
I don't need to ask for-
Okay, so Nathan.
Could I have Scott from CKI speak first, my surveyor?
Yes, you may. Scott did not sign in.
I showed up a little late, sorry.
Oh, I see. Well, make sure that you state clearly your address, full name for our report.
Yeah, I'm Scott Cooter, I'm a land surveyor for CKI, and my address is PO Box
Can you
2699.
speak up so us old people?
Sure, not a problem, yeah. Scott Cooter, CKI Land Surveying, address is PO Box 2699, that's in Deerheart. And I am a proponent of the project, and I represent Nate and Heritage Homes. Yeah, I think Carol did a pretty good job at presenting all the evidence, all kind of jumbled together, and a lot of the stuff came in last minute. But I guess one of the things that I would like to kind of point out is that, I've been doing this for a long time. And, sometimes we do subdivisions where we dedicate the road to the public. So basically, the city owns the road and maintains it and pays for it. A private road is just that, where the landowners that live on that road are responsible for maintaining it. And typically, what would happen would be a road maintenance agreement for a private road. So that would decide how all the landowners that use that road, how they, when they decide to improve it, who pays for it, and all those things, and what actually gets done. Unfortunately, on this project, the 2005 partition happened. Should have been conditioned that there was a road maintenance agreement recorded. However, that didn't happen. And then anything that I believe that Mr. McNally would have had in his notes that would have indicated what happens for future development should have been put into the form of a deed restriction that was also recorded at the county clerk's office. So codified, as Carol put it. Those things didn't happen. So now we're kind of left with a little bit of Donnybrook, but we did, would like to mention that we did get a legal opinion from Christian Zupanzik today. We had a conference call with him regarding the legality of dedicating the easement as a public road. And Christian's statement was, well, you can't dedicate what you don't own. So Nate's property is the back piece. Mr. Evans has the front two pieces. We can't force him to dedicate, when he doesn't have to. But again, a private road functions just like a public road, only it's private, only for the use of the people that live on it. So I think that my letter pretty much clearly states what our opinion is on those things. I would like to point out one thing that I don't think Carol mentioned, that, you know, we're not necessarily willing to pave the entire street. I don't think that Nathan should have to bear the cost for the entire paved section, because part of it is not his. That doesn't seem reasonable. The other thing, we would potentially be willing to pave the apron so that it would be safer for pulling out and also pulling in off the highway. And I think that Nathan would be willing to enter a discussion with Mr. Evans to come up with a road maintenance agreement that sort of resolves some of these issues and lays out the groundwork and actually gets recorded at the county level. And I think Nathan would be willing to pay for the road maintenance agreement. It would require agreement on all parties and signatures. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Your statement was a private road is the same as a public road. You need a public road or you need a city road?
It's, well, public road in the city would be a city road.
But I'm talking about public road.
Right, I tried to say that public road functions the same as a private road. They're both roads. Private road is only allowed to be used by the parties that are subject to it. A public road can be used by anybody. So anybody can.
Except there's a different maintenance. It depends on your city public road or public road.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the distinction you're trying to get at is, but.
Well, I just knowing that I live on a public road.
Sure.
Not a city road or a
Right.
county road.
If
It's
a county
public
road were public, then the county would be responsible for the maintenance. The city public road would be city.
But a public road, people that use it are responsible for.
Right, and a public road is just that. It's dedicated to the public forever, so anybody.
Yeah,
can drive
I was
it.
just trying to get clarified which kind of public road you were talking about.
Right, this would be the city public road.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Sure.
Madam President, may I ask a question of Carol related to this testimony?
Sure.
So what if we required a road maintenance agreement as a condition and the parties were unable to reach agreement on a road maintenance agreement? What happens at that point?
Then they would not, then the conditions of the partition that you approved would not have been met. And when they came back for their final partition approval to
Right.
you, you'd say we haven't met condition X.
So all
deny
Mr.
it.
So all Mr. Evans has to do to block this is to not agree to a road maintenance agreement if we required one.
If you required it.
Thank you.
Okay, Scott, did you want to say anything?
I do, yeah, I'm Nathan Johnson,
Address?
90856 Fort Clatsop Road, Astoria. I think the commentary about a road maintenance agreement is sound. It would be important. But I don't think that Mr. Evans could be required to sign off on it. But I do think that there'd be a lot of potential upside for both property owners, the Evans and Heritage Homes, to come to some agreement. So my position is that it would be likely that there could be some agreement there. But I don't know that it could be a condition for the reasons that were just stated. To the requirement of paving, I think it would be nice if it was paved, but it's about 675 feet from Highway 101 to the property. And I guess in my mind, I look at it, the condition of paving as proportional to the development project. And is it really reasonable to impose that kind of a burden? And I guess from my perspective, it's not. And after the last meeting, June 9th meeting, after hearing about the Grandmark approval that was approved at that meeting, the wheels were turning in my head, and I drove down Grandmark just to refresh my memory to see how many residences were there, being that there was an additional partition approved at that last meeting. And there's seven residences on Groundmark and with the high likelihood of an additional residence with the approval of that partition. I supported that partition for benefit housing in the community, but I guess looking at it as the applicant, I was wondering from the city's position in the planning commission's position, what criteria was looked at when approving that partition with 7 residences that ingress and egress in the same manner as Cutler, with only 3 additional residences. So that kind of stuck in my mind, and I thought it was a valid point to consider when deliberating over this. I think it's important to do an apron at Highway 101 for cars moving out. I think the impact that I'd be bringing into the neighborhood, I think that should be a cost imposed upon me. I have no trouble with that. I think Mr. Evans would have to be agreeable to that because I think that's on his property. So I couldn't just do that, but I would do that. Because I think it would benefit all. And that's what I have.
Thank you. Okay, we've heard from the applicant.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Nathan, 675 feet of paving, do you have an estimate of what that runs nowadays?
I don't know what that is on top of my head. I can guess, but I would say that could be about 50,000. Maybe more, just a guess. Yeah, and that's a guess, but with the increases in fuel, petroleum, it's probably more.
All right, so we've heard from the applicant. So are there any other proponents here for this? Okay, opponents. Do we have opponents?
My name is Brian Evans, and you want my mailing address?
What your mailing address?
1142 Buttercup Road, Haley, Idaho, 83333.
Thank you.
So first, minor little point in your details there, just the CKI email stated EPI Properties and Stephen Evans. I don't know where that came from, but sure, I'm the sole owner of those properties. So I first want to just say that I'm opposing, I bought that property, those buildings exist, it winds the way it does, and in my humble opinion, this project makes no sense in terms of access. That's why, and so the last time I came here, I had 7 days notice that I even knew it was being contemplated. Since then, I've had a little more time, I've engaged some counsel. I just want to say that I think this commission is bound by the ordinance as it exists today. And the fact that prior decisions were made that don't comply with the ordinance, I think you're bound by the ordinance as it is constituted. And I do not believe this project can be approved simply because it doesn't meet, the street would have to be improved to city street standards and paved. It doesn't meet standard 38. And as far as the section 40.2, 25 feet of frontage, if you deemed it a street and dedicated it a street, well, now you don't have lot coverage, because I don't see how you can count, you barely have lot coverage counting at all without these. So I'm simply saying that as it is platted, as it exists now with the current plat, you cannot meet the city ordinance. And I'm not an attorney, my attorney's watching. I feel very, very confident that you cannot compel somebody to dedicate their property or change an easement that exists. We're stuck, we're all stuck with the easement as it was recorded unless we mutually agree to alter it. So, and I wanted to speak to a couple of, because the points that I made today were extremely glossed through. So as far as I'm saying that I submit this very clearly establishes the current easement as shown on the plat was approved. As so I'm quoting from your own minutes from 2005, Mr. McNally. The 25-foot access easement would be sufficient access for 2 parcels. And if additional development were to occur, the access would need to be dedicated as a public road and paved to the city standards. Now, he's the one who stated at that point, the city, he was representing the city. It was in it, obviously you got these minutes from a meeting. It was, he publicly stated that they made a decision that for 2 lots it was sufficient. And they didn't say at some future time you need to pave the road. They said if further development is contemplated. That's where we sit now. But unfortunately, this would be easy if one person still owned all 3 lots. You guys could simply say, well, per our ordinance, you need to pave that road. And that person could say, okay, I'll pave that road. But that's not, it didn't get improved before there was multiple ownership. So we are bound by the easement as it exists. It's a road and utility easement, ingress, egress. It's not a dedicated street, and I submit that you cannot approve this 3-lot subdivision without ignoring your own subdivision ordinance. So that's simply what this comes down to is the ordinance as written, this project can't comply. Now, couple of things to deem this, or let's say that I would agree to dedicate it as a street. You talk about unreasonable, that I would bear costs to pave the street so they could do their project. I'm not asking to pave the street. I'm not asking for a street. I don't want a street. So I mean, to me, the thought that any 1 penny of cost would be borne by me is beyond ridiculous. I mean, I'm not here applying for anything. So that is so, and as far as the access easement as it exists, whether you wanted to do an apron or a street, right now, I was just over there today. It's not dead center, but there's a fire hydrant pretty close to the middle. You would have to relocate the fire hydrant if you were going to confine your access to the easement. There's 2 power poles. There's the stop sign, there's a telephone cable pedestal, and a water meter. So there's a pretty substantial amount of work that would have to be done. You'd have to relocate the power pole because it is stated as ingress, egress, road and utility easement. So I think those are utilities that are appropriately there. But if you're going to dedicate that as a public street, they'd have to be moved. So I just don't think this project fits. And I think I'm not opposed to, I don't care, anybody wants to develop any property they want to. But as I stand there, and I bought this property within the last year. I didn't build the buildings, I didn't put the house there, I didn't subdivide it. I thought when I saw the easement, it's bizarre to me that you would have an easement that would go up there and wind the way it does. I mean, I walked it today. If you were to improve that as a street and pave it, you'd have to take 2 30-foot trees out of that because they're growing in the easement that have been there for however long. So I just don't think that this is a fit to divide that and call it a street and put 3 houses back there. That part of it is my opinion. I don't think it makes sense. That's clearly opinion. But I think I just don't see how you could approve this without ignoring your own ordinance. I mean, I think it's been clearly established that the only way it could be approved would be if that's a street and improved. And whether, dedicating it or not, but it would have to be improved to city standards, which includes paving. And then I think you have to cross the bridge. And I don't, it just strikes me that those lots barely fit. So if you're calling the access part of it the street, if you're calling that a street, which you have to call it a street if you're going to meet 40.2, which says each lot has to have 25 foot of frontage. So if that's a street, then I don't see how you can use the remainder to meet your minimum lot requirement. I mean, these are small lots, it's a tight little development. I think there are issues in the character of land. There's drainage issues, water stands back there a lot. All of that combined, but I think if we, as the city planner mentioned, the focus here is really about the access. And that is what I said last time, and what I'm reiterating is there simply is not adequate access as platted. Now, I know we talked some about intent, and I believe that and that doesn't really matter, because what matters is that I don't believe that you can, that because somebody wants to develop a piece of property and zoning allows it, I don't believe that I can be compelled to improve my lot or allow my lot to be improved and paved across. So I just don't think that as platted today, you can meet the ordinance as written today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to, as an opponent, would like to speak?
Madam Chair, Commissioners.
Yes. Would you like
Abby Germain with Elam and Burke on behalf of Brian Evans. My address is 251 East Front Street, Suite 300, Boise, Idaho 83701. I will be very brief. I know the commission has heard a lot of testimony this evening, and I do completely agree with the city planner and staff that this should be really focused on one issue. And based on that one issue, the commission must deny the partition as proposed by the applicant. That reason is because without dedicating the easement as a public road and meeting the city street standards, they cannot meet the conditions of both the 2005 partition, in which the city administrator stated that should further development be conducted on that parcel, that it would have to be dedicated as a public road and paved to city standards. In addition to the fact that the Gerhardt City ordinance requires that should the partition be granted, it would have to front a public road and street. And in that circumstance, again, you would have to have dedication of the street and you would have to have it paved to city standards. As city staff has already pointed out, dedication would require the consent of all property owners adjacent to that easement. And in this case, that does include Mr. Evans. So today, without an agreement to dedicate the easement as a public road, and without any other ability to meet the requirements of the 2005 partition and the requirements of the subdivision ordinance, the commission must deny the partition as presented. I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
And commissioners have questions for her? Thank you. Okay. I lost my cheat sheet. What happened to it? I know that the applicant can respond. Oh, here it is. You took it. If the applicant would like to, applicant's rebuttal.
I think we've covered all the issues.
Okay.
As I listened to the opposition, I think we've covered everything. I didn't hear anything that was, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
The only thing I'd like to add, sorry, is that,
Can you stand up, please?
Sure, I can do that. Groundmark Lane was approved in the last planning commission that we were at, and it had the exact same issues. And I don't think it would be reasonable to insist that Mr. Groundmark pay for the entire paving of Groundmark Lane and dedicating it with 7 other owners. It just doesn't, it's not, I don't, here I'm gonna say it, I don't believe it's legal. So there is 25 feet of frontage on all 3 of these lots. It's allowed by the code. It's the way the zone was set up for 7,500 square foot lots. It meets the criteria. I believe it's approvable as is.
Thank you. Okay, I will close the public hearing now. It is now time for the commission to have discussion. Please, no one make a motion before everyone has had their say, please. I'll start over here with right.
Thank you. Carol, this might be a question for you. Can you maybe explain the difference between the Groundmark situation and this situation?
Right, Chad.
Right here. Sorry.
I totally agree.
Can we explain the difference between this and the Broadmark decision, which was approved a month before, a couple months ago?
So, thank you. The Groundmark partition seemed to happen, and there was no requirement. I think there might be a road agreement for maintenance, but I don't think there was. And they were not required to pay at that time. And so I think that the thought process was, as soon as how it was the last piece or a further piece than what's already been established, we can require things on the piece that we're talking about and that we're currently dividing. But again, we couldn't make people do something on property that we didn't have any influence over because we didn't own, or the ownership was all separate. So there's really there's not much difference between the two.
Well, and there's unfortunately been some maybe institutional thinking that the roads were there. The access is there, it meets the zoning standards. You can't necessarily go back and require paving and dedication, but as we researched in this case, it was going to be required by the last city administrator if this kind of proposal was presented. But it was sort of a fait accompli. I mean, those lots over there, all, like I said, they're all the same. The road's there, it's not gonna be extended. And it was just practice that I can't describe why this one's different exactly than Groundmark and why we didn't require them to pave it a couple months ago, other than that's been the historical practice of the city.
Yeah, I just don't know if after the fact we can require.
But per the subdivision ordinance that Jermaine brought up,
Yes,
that potentially should have been applied. And any of those other developments along those gravel roads over the past however many years.
Correct. And the roads that are gravel now, and some we do have around town that do not have an agreement. And the neighborhood is basically tasked with they're on their own time and money to take care of those roads. They've asked the city, why is my street not paved? Why don't you pave it? Well, usually the developers at the time pay for it, but when they get beyond that, the city really doesn't have the ability to require it or to do it. And then we wouldn't pave it because it's still not our street. So that's one aspect of this.
But if, and in that case, maybe we'll talk about that case a little bit, so because if we did require that last development to be, that last subdivision to meet this the subdivision ordinance, then how would that that street would become city property. Correct? And the city would maintain it. But who would pay for that initial paving? Would it be the new developer, or would that be then divided up between the property owners on the street?
You know, that's the problem.
And then obviously, how does that apply to this situation?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that, well, the way it happened, it happened. 7 lots, 7 different owners. Now we're on 2 lots and 2 owners. And the broad mark is straighter. I think the lots are R1, the lots are bigger. You know, I don't think we have a good answer why we didn't require it then, except that the road was there and it was probably not thoroughly looked at in the same way until this case came up and it was challenged.
Right, this case is different because it does have an opponent.
Right.
The other one did not, and so.
That's probably the key difference.
A key difference, and I've admitted.
Right. So basically what we're saying is the planning commission has kind of failed to do its duty over the last however many years with those roads and subdivisions.
Well, I'm not gonna go that far, but without looking at every case and looking at the first original decision and the research, and I'm not, you know.
And yeah, I'm not trying to,
Yeah,
anybody, but just like now this is thrown in our lap. And we have to, there's no time like the present to start making the right decisions, you know.
Exactly.
And there is one, may I comment on this comment? I don't know what the
Yes,
appropriate.
yeah, go ahead.
There is one additional difference that Carol did point out, and that is that this issue has the McNally comments from 2005. And Grandmark didn't have.
We didn't.
I'm sorry, once we're into discussion.
He's looking behind, she's looking behind you.
Oh, okay,
You want
okay.
to talk, and I'm just
Okay.
saying, once we're in the discussion, we're in the
Yeah.
discussion.
So I think that's an additional key difference between the two cases.
Well, the other question I have, if I can
Let's
interrupt.
let Don.
I think we have a few more, but take more notes. So the term dedication is an agreement between the property owners to then turn that easement into a road, which becomes city property,
Deeded to the city.
deeded to the city. Now, then does that affect the assessed tax value for those properties? Like it minimizes it, I'm sure.
But
I mean,
don't know exactly, but it might increase the value if there's a paved road that's maintained by the public.
okay, fair enough. If there is not an agreement and the city wants to take an easement for a public city road, does the city have the option to condemn it?
Eminent domain,
Eminent domain?
I'm sure there's a process for that. I wouldn't know if it would be, successful. That's a detailed question. I just can't answer it. But I know that eminent domain is difficult to do. And then everybody must be remunerated for the lesson taken from them as well. Gotcha. It would be difficult.
Yeah, so. This will make sense. Is there a benefit to the city to turn that into a public street?
Less complaints due to maintenance being guaranteed, not necessarily.
I think that, if we were to put a street in now, it wouldn't look like this. And hopefully we wouldn't get like to this again. But no, as it's, we wouldn't want this particular issue. Even if they gave us land to dedicate them, which also the point being is that you'd be taking land away from these properties and then affecting the amount of square footage they have and what they would do. But no, we wouldn't take a street like that. It was never built to standard.
But can I ask Chad to follow up, so the 25 feet would not be enough to put in the city street?
Yeah, it is. And if all the property owners agree to bring it up to standards, we would look at that, but it would be the city's final decision. And it would be through, I believe, the planning commission and city council.
If the street, if there was an agreement for dedication, then who would pay for that paving and that improvement and the movement? Would it be the property owners or
This would be the property owners. We wouldn't take it until it was complete and to standard.
Can I ask some questions of the audience? The question for
Specifically who?
Mr. Evans. In your letter, you mentioned something about 2 lots instead of the 3. If the new subdivision were turned into 2 lots, would that be something you'd be amenable to as far as dedicating it to become a public street?
No, I was referencing the comments from 2005 when they said that the easement was sufficient for 2 lots, meaning there's 1 lot that fronts the street and the easement services the back 2 lots. Those are existing lots.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Sharon?
I'm so confused. What's the bottom line on what we're ruling on here tonight? I mean, what one single thing are we having to say yay or nay to? I'm sorry, there's just this,
Yeah,
this is like.
it's a lot. This is unusual, honestly, I think. We can say that much, and that's a good thing. If I would look at the conditions, if you want to try and focus in on something, this memo, and as they were written in the first round, what is, it's different here from the first hearing and tonight, number 3. And that's the one that's being contested about if additional development were to occur, the access easement would need to be dedicated to the city as a public road and paved to city streets. Therefore, the final plat shall include dedication, this is the part here. And I would take out the reference to Dennis McNally and all that, because that's really the finding. The final plat shall include dedication of the easement to the city of Gerhart as a public street prior to issuance of an occupancy permit. The first home construction, Cutler Lane shall be dedicated to a public street and paved from Highway 101 to parcel 3 per city local street specifications.
Okay, so that's the key thing.
Yep,
Are we able to do that? Because according to Scott, it says, I don't believe the city can require either of those 2 things.
right. And so now you have new evidence since this was written. And new evidence, the old, what this was written based on Dennis McNally's statement in 2005, the city administrator, that it had to be paved and dedicated and approved to city standards if any new lots were proposed.
I understand.
What's happening. So now we have more opinions about what about Mr. Evans, whose property this crosses? And is it illegal or is it, we can't require him his approval? Can we ask for his approval or can we approve it knowing that might not happen? That he won't participate?
Yes, so,
Yeah.
So are we setting a standard for going forward? So say we approve this, just say we do. That it has to be dedicated and
Right.
paved. Is that in order to set a standard going forward? Even though we know that in this case, he's not gonna agree to that? I'm not
Yeah.
getting,
No,
or
it's
are
just-
we just kind of like,
we're trying to apply the standard now, even though, like you said, it's not, everything has changed in terms of the ownership. And the more we learn, I feel, Chad, we can't necessarily make Mr. Evans do that.
Right.
And so here we are.
Are we setting a standard for?
Well, yeah, because now we're kind of going from the old standard, which was a little bit loose.
So is it important to set that standard now? It sounds like it is, even though we know this is gonna be negated in this case.
May I ask you a question about that? Just to clarify, does that mean, are we setting precedent for future decisions based on all subdivisions? Or are we setting precedents just for subdivisions that may look like this, that have the issue?
You're not asking me, right?
No, I think that would be different. Is that what you're asking?
He's asking, is that your question?
Yeah, I guess so, yes.
Yeah, is this made for precedent so that all future subdivisions would be allowed to do this sort of thing?
Allowed to do what sort of thing?
Not
Navigated.
Well, that's the problem. We go back in time and it often wasn't. And we're trying to apply the subdivision ordinance now. And we're in a difficult situation because of the two owners.
Right,
That's the problem.
I understand.
So it wouldn't, you can't compare it to the future decisions because hopefully all future decisions will address this at the right time. This is,
Right, but if we're not gonna accomplish anything by voting yes to have this dedicated and paved in this instance, which we aren't going to accomplish anything as far as this particular instance, since Mr. Evans is going to gate it, right? In this particular instance, we are not accomplishing anything, even if we vote to have it dedicated and paved. Is that correct? I'm just trying to distill this down to like the bare.
well, I mean, this is the first step in this decision. This comes back to you after tonight. Let's say you approve it with that condition. And then set your final plat, when you come back, you have to meet this condition, and then either they drop it, the applicant withdraws, or, we come back to the final plat and then, or gets appealed, if you approved it. I mean, it's not over. All remedies are exhausted. I think it's up to you at this point to decide what the right answer is, and it's not easy.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I believe the specific question by the Commissioner, however, was what is the decision before the Commission this evening? And the decision
Yeah.
before the Commission.
I appreciate you wanting to talk. If she has a specific question for you, she will ask it. But I've taken input from everyone at this point. I hope you understand that.
She does.
Oh, okay.
Can I make one other comment that
Yes.
doesn't have anything to do with this question? But still has to do with the whole partition question. Can I do that?
And this is a time for
Okay,
discussion.
all right, I'll make it quick. So I do not think, this is just my take on reading the part that says health and, welfare, or however it says, of, the people that are gonna live there, the people that live around there, et cetera. I do not think that taking out 20 trees is in the interest of anybody's health. I will go on record saying that.
Thank you. Karen.
This is what I'm struggling with. It seems like we're dealing with two things here. First, we're dealing whether the application meets the standards required by the city is what we should be dealing with. And secondly, we're trying to mediate between two landowners, whether to have some sort of a management agreement or maintenance agreement and that's really leaked into our discussion where it doesn't belong. And this, and Sharon said, what do you think is the key question here? And to me, the key question here, is there required to be a dedicated public road paved if in fact we approve these 3 lots? Now, our city attorney said on 6/21/22, he said it, quote, doesn't preclude further land division, but seems like they will need to build the street up to code. Seems like is not exactly the city attorney answer I want.
Yeah.
Pay him for it, but seems like does tell me that we're gonna have to get a dedicated road and it's gonna have to be paved. And if we pass this and approve it, then we could make that a condition. And then obviously, Mr. Evans is not going to agree to the dedication. So he loses either way. So my question is, can we deny this based on the fact that we already know that it cannot be dedicated? And my second thing is on page 2, the bottom findings, says staff finds that the proposed partition provides 25 feet of frontage to each of the subject 3 lots by extending the easement from its current terminus to the new parcels. How can he extend an easement to these other parcels without, if you're gonna change an easement, you need to have agreement from the other party of the easement. And you just can't arbitrarily do that. So that's my 2 cents worth. It's the dedication. If in fact it's required, it could be made a condition. And if it's a condition, obviously Mr. Evans won't agree to it, to the dedication. So is that, can we deny it based on that?
Your question about extending the easement, I asked, and I have it from our planning director here. The easement on the partition plan is actually a new easement, benefiting the new lots for fire turnaround, access, and utilities to those lots. This may require more digging, legal analysis, or appeal to determine.
Yeah.
So it's a new easement, it's not an extension.
And I would agree that the word extension wasn't probably properly used, because you're not extending the prior decision. You're just putting it on the 2 properties that are involved here, that they're giving each other an easement to drive.
A while ago, I made a note. When you grant an easement to a piece of property, it's granted to a piece of property with a specific parcel number. What you're gonna do is divide this into 3 parcels. They will, I assume, will all have a separate parcel number. So how could this old easement apply to those 2
It doesn't.
parcels?
I think it was erroneous.
Pardon?
That it was being extended. It's, and if you don't mind clarification maybe from Scott, I think the easement, what it says on the plat, new fire truck turnaround easement and access and utility easement. But it only pertains to the properties, the 3 lots. It doesn't have anything to do with the other easement. And I
Yeah,
guess-
that's correct. I mean, the easement is basically, the original easement is somewhat in a way going away, and then we're providing a new fire turnaround easement location.
So that's what this extending the easement
Well,
does?
then it does go away, I guess. I mean,
So, but how can the original easement that's tied into 1 lot with a number become an easement to those other 3 lots with separate numbers?
good question.
That easement can be granted for whatever purpose on the new partition plat with.
What are you telling me?
Oh, I'm just saying that easement can be granted for that specific purpose on the new partition plat. So we will state on the plat, when we record it with the county, that this is what the new easement is for.
I'm skeptical.
Okay.
It happens all the time.
Anything else
I've been doing
here?
this for 30 years.
I'm done.
All right, Russ,
Oh, well, I guess I wanted to back up a little bit. We keep relating from Roan Mark to this one, and tell me if I'm wrong, but Roan Mark, didn't each of those lots previous to our thing from 2 months ago, weren't those lots all the easements were across those lots? Those individual lots had the easement already part of them, correct?
That's correct.
So that road was established, all the owners agreed to be part of the deal, and so then the final guy just said, hey, I'll let it be part of mine, but so that's just my comment, but the other aspect that I think we're fighting the McNally report from 2005. To me, kind of we have our code that you said it actually is restrictive enough that all of the things we're discussing should have been done appropriately. And we didn't do it. But now, to me, the McNally's comments are specific to this one we're talking about tonight. And those specific comments would say, yeah, you need to pave it. irregardless of us not paving Grown Mark, not paving East Pine Lane or whatever those other ones are. Anyway, so that's my only comment. The rest of it has been beat to death, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Not adding much. I just think that we have 3 pieces of evidence which suggest that if we choose to approve this, we should retain number 3 in the original findings and not delete it. Number 1, our current city code suggests that it should be paved and brought up to city standards. Number 2, the McNally comments indicate that it should be paved and brought up to city standards. And number 3, our own attorney says we need to build the street up to code. So we have lots of evidence, I think, that suggests that if we choose to approve this, and I don't personally agree that we should not approve it because we foresee the opponent fighting it, and that's a future issue. Let them decide what they're going to do next. I think that if we choose to approve it on all other aspects, if we think that it's an appropriate subdivision for other aspects, we retain item number 3 in the findings and let them determine how they want to proceed. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I want to go back to this.
Yes.
And I wasn't trying to be flip when I said I'm cynical, but when you have an easement, it's a written document that's recorded that the public goes to and they look at it and they know what that easement is for. And that easement is for a particular piece of property. And when you're saying that that could be transferred to these other 2 properties, I've never heard of that being done before, although you say it's been done all the time. If we do approve this, I would like one of the conditions to be that the easement that now exists be recorded in such a way to service these other properties. I think that otherwise you'll have 2 properties without the easement. And I would like to see a written record that that has taken place.
Can I get that again? The existing easement shall be recorded to service the.
Yes, would it be, and I'm not sure it could be done without approval of Mr. Evans.
To service the new parcels.
Because it's taking his easement and assigning it to 2 other properties.
As usual, I have things to say. The first thing I have to say is unfortunately, the 2 parties could not have got together long before we got here and come to some kind of agreement before we got to this point. I do believe that the notes from 2005 and their intent are important, whether anyone believes it or not. I've sat on planning commissions for something like 15 years and have gone back and looked at previous notes, previous intent, because sometimes things are written and things are said and they don't quite go together. You're trying to figure out their intent. Our meetings are recorded and they're also minutes done, because what goes on between the discussions are important when any decision is being made. There's been a lot of comparison, comparing Cutler to Park Lane, but I think the comparison would be closer to East Pine. I don't know if any of you were here when we approved, or what we didn't approve, the division of East Pine. And the reason, number 1 reason we didn't, is because the homeowners on that road signed a petition and said, we do not want this. And this commission denied that partition. We only have 1 owner, but that's okay. He's a majority owner. He owns 2 of the lots, and he's saying he doesn't like it. I have problems. Cutler goes up, makes a turn, and goes this way. It goes up the hill. I don't want to see the trees gone. I don't know what Park Lane looked like before. I'm just taking someone's word. And I'm a visual person, and if I can't see what it looked like, I don't have any engineering report. I wish there had been something to let us know. Anything preliminary to give us an idea of what putting that 3rd lot back there. I agree with Carrie, the easement was granted through the commercial property, and that's really important to me, commercial property at the front, back to the house that exists and back to the second lot. We do not have any place else that I'm aware of, a active commercial business. I don't know how many vehicles Mr. Evans has, but I probably counted 10, 12 there today. Maybe, that are parked on that easement. I mean, you can get through a single car, but heaven forbid if a fire truck had to make it through that area. I drive by it every day, because I live up that way. And I do, I mean, we've said, I don't believe that Mr. Evans should have to pay his own private easement. That just really bothers me. I've written and read all over the place. So the intent, I think, is important, and that's really where I'm going to. Is I think that what was intended in 2005 to happen is important, and it's important to do. That's all I have to say. So we're at a point. Does anyone else have anything?
I guess what point we're at right now is we just say, hey, we're gonna deny it. And I asked Carol if we come up with legitimate reasons to deny it, that would stand up on appeal, or we approve it with all the conditions that we have come up with, knowing that they can't be met.
I'll let Carol go. When we denied the East Pine one, it was appealed. And because it was outside of the city, but within our urban growth boundary, it was approved by the county. But I mean, you can still, whether it can be appealed or not is another thing. The only other thing I mentioned, I forgot to say was in the comprehensive plan, it talks about density and keep maintaining openness, and we're showing 3 minimum acreage lots in there.
That's what the zoning allows.
But it's still the minimum
Right.
for that zoning, yes.
Just one clarification on one thing you said.
Yes.
I'm almost 100% sure that the business is zoned R2 as well.
No, it's a C2.
Is it C2? Okay, good.
It absolutely is.
It doesn't quite, it's really hard.
Yeah, that's hard to see on that.
Yeah,
I'll ask for this commercial.
yeah, I know it's a commercial.
Carol, don't you have to write findings to support a
Yes.
denial?
Mhm.
And would you have findings that could support a denial?
I can write findings any way you direct me to write them. I know. Well, there's evidence on both sides, and the denial would take the evidence on the denial side that I have.
Yes, Sharon.
So I have a question about what you just said, and that is if we deny this, like on East Pine, and they appeal it, doesn't it go to the county?
That's the city council.
Oh, it goes to city.
This is outside city limits, but within urban growth
All
boundary.
right.
Stick around long enough, you'll have it all figured out.
We're still discussing, right?
We're still discussing. If I have a motion, we're still discussing.
I think we have, you mentioned this, that we would hope that the two parties are able to reach an agreement, and perchance if this was approved to, which would fill the best use of that particular lot in the zone, but then also follow this division ordinance, which would require a public street. I'm not so convinced that two parties cannot come to an agreement on it. And I don't know if that's a financial issue, but I would think and hope that the two parties could come to an agreement on what that public road solution would be, because I think in my mind, that's the point that I think probably has to be applied to this development, and that would then require the two parties to come to an agreement on that. I think that's a possibility. I mean, Terry, you're saying it's not gonna happen, but it could happen.
That was why I said we retain the number 3 in the findings, and let the parties determine the next steps. It's not up to us to determine that they can't come to agreement. They need to try to come to agreement.
Yeah.
Can I clarify one thing on number 3, which may not be perfectly clear the way it's written? Prior to issuance of an occupancy permit, the first home construction color land shall be dedicated a public street and paved from Highway 101 to parcel 3 at the applicant's cost.
I think that's appropriate.
I believe that was in my intent, but it didn't seem.
I thought that's what you had.
And so did I. So however your motion is crafted, I think the cost issue has to be clarified.
I'm sure there's some like unfortunate feelings about in the past that this, especially subdivision ordinance, has not been applied, but I feel it's important that we start doing that properly.
I don't want to be in a position where you send them home and say, okay, you mediate, you come back, and then you come back to us. What we need to do is state our claim, make a point. And if you want to have them settle it, then what you do, we approve it. These are the conditions. You need to get a dedication. You need to record these easements. You got to do all this, and then they can figure out how to come to that. And I don't want to put this over for a month and have them come back with something that we're going to spend another 2 hours plowing through to see if we like it. So we either deny it or we approve it with the stringent conditions that we've talked about.
If we can deny it and they can try to work it out or come back to a different proposal. We can approve it with the conditions there, or we can approve it and change the conditions.
Right.
We can't keep putting off because we have timelines. Remember, anytime we have an application, we have timelines.
Well, if we approve it with conditions, then that sets the standard that they need to negotiate around, is how they can meet those conditions. And obviously, the simplest thing is just deny it.
So
Yes.
if we approve it and they meet and try to come, because that's, the next step is gonna be them coming to some understanding of this. It's not gonna completely just say, forget it. Can they come back to us with a new proposal?
Sure.
Yeah.
Even though we've approved this?
They can decide they don't like it and then come back with something new.
It would be a new proposal. Your 120-day deadline is September 16th. So that can be extended at the applicant's agreement. So that's not necessarily a firm deadline. It could come back with, as a revised proposal of the original.
So do you have 2 questions to me, the road and whether they can actually subdivide? If the intention was for this easement to serve just the 3 properties, the one on the front, the one in the middle, and one in the back, or whether it was intended for it to serve 3 lots in the back, the one in the middle, and the one in the front. And then what are the requirements? Really good question.
I move we approve it with the type restrictions that Carol's presented here, the specifically the McNally language and the easement questions presented in a way that puts the burden on them To
along
determine
with
what
the
the,
other conditions that we had already.
well, yeah, plus that whole list of 8 or 9. If we approve it, I don't want to pass it to city council. I think city council, I'm not picking on city council, but we've had other things that we've denied and they go, oh no, we don't want to get involved, it's approved. I say we
Okay.
we toe the line, we put our neck on it and approve it with
Okay,
the restrictions we've
we
discussed.
approve it with the change to number 3 with applicant's cost, with that additional line.
Well,
Yes.
yes, and what Terry said, that the existing easement shall be rewritten
To provide
to
access.
provide,
to the
to
other
service the
properties.
new parcels
Right.
So those 2 changes in addition to what we already have.
and the cost, which I.
Yeah, and the other 9 or however many are on that list,
Okay,
10.
so Russ has moved to approve the partition with number 3 as rewritten. Do I have a second?
Number 3 is rewritten and the addition of the, another one related to the,
No, number 3 that is all number 3 that you rewritten.
a part of number 3,
What
that'd be
part are you talking about?
the easement
Yes,
comment.
that would be part of.
That'd be part of it. I understand.
I second.
Don seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. Bring down the vote, 3-2. 4-2.
42.
Did you vote, Terry?
I voted for it.
Okay. There you are. We are done. We'll take a break here, a couple of minutes. So those that-
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners.
Thank you. We will get you in a minute. I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries.
And we're still being recorded.
Yes, but
We're taking back.
we're taking a few minutes. I have 5 if you need to use the rest of my.
Is there water?
Chad, is there any?
I don't know if there's any water.
Chad, is
Cups.
is there any water?
Yeah.
That would
Can
be
you
great.
get us some water?
Pressure squeeze.
I like lemon in mine, please.
I'll do my best.
It's
May not be
not-
11. So I'll get you one for each of you.
Vodka.
Thank you, Chad. They're not normally all
No.
that. I know it's being recorded, so you gotta be careful, but that was interesting.
Yeah, that was kind of a tough one there.
Oh, we shouldn't be.
He said it's still like.
I think it's, yeah, we're still being recorded.
You're a long-term resident of that?
Yeah, quite a few, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
So you got a place here and a place somewhere else?
Important.
Oh, okay. Well, that's, Terry's the same way. He has a house here.
Actually, we're not obligated, but we're in the process of moving from Michigan to Portland full time.
Oh,
And here, Portland here.
Well.
We haven't yet sold our house in Michigan.
No,
So we're still my wife's still working for us up there. He's retiring.
Oh,
We own a house in Portland. So we're able to raise Portland, which I don't- in Michigan, which I don't want to own anymore at all. So we're working on that problem.
so can you?
How much-
Michigan
how much
a
lawyer
hot
making,
market? I mean,
Terry?
Can you sell it?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
who knows? I would put that in 4 months ago. All we can do now is,
Okay, so-
all the situation.
So nothing
It's
against you guys.
It's a nice house, it's right in town. So should be straightforward. My wife has that. She's already submitted her. Thank you so much, Chad.
What did I do with any of it?
She submitted her resignation. Finish out.
You retired? You kind of got yourself right into the grind.
Yeah,
Become a permanent small town.
I love it.
How did that? Do you know some of the?
My food
people that are in the-
No, I just when the city came up, I applied, back in December, November, December.
Yeah.
And there was a
Well, depends
position
on where you're
available.
going now.
Yeah, I went through the
Well, I know,
process,
in the
the
junk.
interview process.
Oh,
And,
Have you done that?
yeah.
at the time, somebody was actually maybe dying. I forget who it
We
was,
went
got
there,
that
probably 10
role
years
at that
ago,
time.
15 years
Okay.
But then when the
ago.
second one came up,
I've been-
the mayor recommended it.
Oh, I see. So you have to do it on is-
Exactly.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to be involved. That's the place I live. I think about,
Everybody-
Yeah, I think that's right.
I'm not running for anything. I'm not interested.
You're right on the show.
Yeah, well, no, I've been on this thing for probably a dozen years. So.
Sounds like you're gonna be running it soon, is that happening?
I had
Maybe I'll
this
put it that one.
meeting like 2 meetings.
Is that the one where they said you're gonna run it
Yes,
next?
and so then, and our previous, we had one of the fellow you replaced.
Yeah.
Was the vice chair or the vice president, whatever you call it, second chair.
So he theoretically should have.
So he bailed. No, I'm not playing this year. You know, I played all
Okay,
the
where
year,
is it?
but I've got a family
Where's the
thing on
answer?
the second Saturday, the last Saturday.
Yeah, I'm gonna play it.
Oh, good.
Last year I made it to Friday. This was the first time.
Well, good. Good luck in that. But anyway, so I don't know, but yeah, they made me. So I'll just do
While you were
her
here.
job. I'll do her job very poorly.
Oh, sure.
I'm not as organized.
All right, it's 8:05, we will reconvene here. That was a 5-minute break, Angelina, wherever you went, thought you were back here, you disappeared. Must wait for Angelina.
You
The
ready?
most important person.
Yeah, right.
Which is. That's good. Okay, you ready to go, Angelina?
Yeah.
All right, so. Breathe in, breathe out. We're going to go on to. Public hearing on 22-05 CU Windjammer conditional use application. An application for conditional use permit to convert the Windjammer Motel into 26 long-term multifamily apartments. Staff report, please, because we've already read the disclosure statement and everything else.
Yes, thank you. You have a staff report dated July 7th, and I am just gonna ask you right now, based on what time it is and the particular application, would you like me to go through all this because some of you are new? Or can I maybe field questions at this point?
That'd be a good
Are
idea.
we good with that? Everyone's read the
Absolutely.
information? Okay, okay. So basically, I'm gonna do her summary because I summarized a lot. So she does.
Yeah.
No, I'm just gonna say, the important stuff is, she's gone through, Carol has gone through the findings and that and everything, so you get back to pages 14 and 15 and conclusions, I said I could summarize.
Okay.
You again, you get 3 choices of what we can do. And they have some conditions for approval. Back, I have to do with the septic system important in Gerhart. Highway 101, the right of way, parking, outdoor lighting. And we all know what it's like to pull out in 101 if we don't have clear vision, because boy, 101's had lots of accidents on today. Yes, you can put that in it too. It's been dangerous out there. So, Bosky, would you like to talk to us? Sure. Okay, this is your turn. Please stand, give us your address your mailing address and tell us what you would like. Let us know.
Well, I'm here representing, first of all, my name is Kim Bosky. My address is P.O. Kim Bosky.
You have to speak up.
BAUSKE. My address is P.O. Box 1053, Seaside, Oregon, 97138. And I'm the sole owner of the Windjammer. I inherited it February 1st, 2017. I've been running it just like my father ran it, which was as a hybrid extended stay. I have several families that I inherited that have lived there since 2014. All of the units have kitchens, and there's one unit that has a studio, and I've just always rented it as a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, so that everybody has kitchens. I primarily try to rent to the workers, people who come to town that have a reason to be here. And I had some people call up my brother and ask if they could come and look at the property. I didn't put it up for sale. And they're a young couple that moved to Warrenton, and they're interested in possibly buying it. So I gave them some information and they went and looked for financing. And that's where they found Zachary and Stephen Yett, who are mortgage brokers that own a company called Seton Funds down in Eugene. And they came and looked at it with this gentleman, Dan, and said Dan couldn't qualify for the money. He's pretty young. And they were interested. And so I said, well, I'll entertain, whatever it is that you're proposing. And they said that they were interested in a multi-family housing. They didn't want to run a motel. And I explained to them that, essentially when the rooms come open, I rent them as motel rooms until I find somebody that needs a place to live and they qualify, and effectively they can live there. During the pandemic, I got stuck with a lot of people. Spent months and months and months never getting paid, and I just recently evicted 3 families. I got 4 other families to move out. They couldn't afford to pay, and so I've just been doing what I always do, which is getting them back up and running. And pretty much plan to continue to do that unless these folks get approved and they're able to buy it. I don't have any intention to change what I'm doing. I've got 3 employees that are long-term employees that work through my family in Seaside, and work on my dad's property. One of them's worked there since 1996 or something, and the other one's the other person that works with me now has been there for about 8 or 9 years, working in various properties for the family. So I live part-time in Maui, so I go back and forth, and obviously it's a better beach. I intended to go back pretty much after my dad passed away. I came out to do the accounting because I'm an accountant by trade, and I just finalized everything with my family this week. And so I'm ready to go back to Maui if I can sell it and get the people that are buying it to be the right people. The city desperately needs housing, and it needs housing that doesn't keep going up in price. I've had 1 rent increase in 5 years, and that was after I'd owned it for 2 years. I raised the rent on a couple people, and then I focused on raising the rents on the new people who came in, so they were paying market rate. The people who lived there since 2014 have pretty much not had any rent increases. And I do that because they haven't gotten any raises. So I've been able to stay pretty much 95% full the entire time I've owned it. I think in general, most people feel like it's an apartment that they live in because all the units are 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom. I don't have any like typical like Motel 6. Everything has a full-size kitchen, or not a full-size kitchen, but full-size appliances. It has like a kitchen strip. And I think it would work well for these folks. They seem to want to do the right thing and keep the people that are there. And my staff will lose their jobs, but one of them's, he just retired out of Social Security. The other one, she's my age, so we're 63. We're soon to be retired. So it's not going to disrupt, a lot of people financially. To lose their job, they live on the property, they're going to be able to maintain their apartments. So to me, it seems like a good idea. The town certainly needs housing. at this point. So kind of where we're at. But I will continue to pay lodging taxes and, you know, run it as a hotel as long as I own it, because that's what I've been doing. And, you know, I take people in by the night, by the week. They pay when they get their paycheck, so it's not always a month-to-month thing. I don't have any leases with any of them. I've been very laid back about it because I was an accountant, not a landlord. And the landlord little shtick isn't really something that I've really wanted to get involved in. It's been more of a, you know, hope that people come in, pay their bills, and if they can't, they leave. And it works pretty well until the pandemic hit. And so, you know, I'm at a point, the last few people who've come in have all come in by the month, because people who want to buy it and want to rent by the month, they've promised to give the people who are living there that are paying weekly or bi-weekly the chance over 6 months to get themselves up to being able to pay by the month, rather than just saying you have to, you know, be able to meet the monthly. And I've let people know that that will be expected of them, so it's not a surprise. And you know, my hope is that all of them will be able to keep their housing. They've been good tenants. You know, some of them had to get rent relief, but as soon as they got their rent relief ended, they continued to pay. So they're getting a good group of tenants. You know, so, but that's it.
I have a other question for you.
Yeah.
So this young couple, anyone on younger than 60?
Yeah, they're not involved anymore.
Okay, so they're not, so are you gonna maintain?
No, I told them, if they want it, it's as is, you gotta pay me off, I am not sticking around. Because they tried to say, you know, how about we pay you something down, you stick around? No.
So is that Zachary Smith and SR yet? That's.
They are the two that are planning to be the owners, and
Okay.
then they're hiring a property management company, which may be that couple.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay, so,
I'm not part of any of their planning, I just know that, you know, they're, what they've told me that they're interested in, and what I read in here about them hiring property managers.
so let's say this, with approval, they would buy the property from you, is that?
Yes, they made an offer on the property, and if this gets approved, it's supposed to close next week.
Okay, I just needed, I wasn't sure where ownership was there.
And the bank wouldn't give them a loan unless they got it as approved by the city as a conditional use.
I can understand that.
Yeah, the banks told me that they weren't interested in, you know, giving money to a motel. I inherited it with zero money. I was given $9,000 in prepaid rent, and every single unit was in the worst shape ever. Had tons of deferred maintenance, so I pretty much spent all of my inheritance selling off what I did get and putting it into the property to make it energy efficient, to bring everything up to the standard that I would be willing to live in, which is a much higher standard than what it was. And the second year I owned it, I did 15 units. The next year I did 10. So everything got upgraded, new carpet, you know, upgraded the appliances, new beds, couches, all the things that made it sanitary, easy to clean, very presentable, and seemed to be appealing to people.
What does rent go for?
You know, right now, if it's a single person, I'll rent to them for $279 a week. So basically, that's $12.95 a month. And it's all utilities, and I've maintained, there's one.
Is that furnished?
Yep.
too? Oh, it's furnished.
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah, and all the utilities, we pay everything. You know, and again, I every single person, I work with whatever their pay structure is, you know, because sometimes they'll come in and they'll have a job and they're paid, you know, by a month. Most of the people are paid, it seems like they're paid every 2 weeks. So if they tell me that they can't meet the rent, if they can meet it every 2 weeks, then we meet it every 2 weeks. So.
Does anyone else have questions for Ms. Paulson?
Just so you know, the applicant is on the line.
Oh, there's someone there?
I think Stephen Yet had dialed in. He may still be on the telephone.
Are you there, Mr. Yet?
I am. I've been here for all glorious 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Good for you.
discussion.
All right, Steven, you could have played a game of golf during that meeting or something, I don't know. Mr. Young, would you like to speak?
Don't have a whole lot to add to what Kim has done a good job of recapping. Zach and I intend to purchase the property, continue the good upgrades that Kim has started several years ago. We're just going to, again, just continue with that, adding some landscaping, improving the lighting. We're in contact with an insulation company to improve the insulation where Kim hasn't had an opportunity to quite get that done yet. And we just plan on maintaining it as affordable housing that's well cared for and locally managed. We've probably settled on a property manager, a woman who's been doing it for many years in the area, great reputation. So we just want to provide good, decent housing that's well maintained for the Gerhardt folks.
Could I ask a question of,
Yes, you can ask a question.
Mr. Yett, do you and Mr. Smith own other properties similar to this?
Zach doesn't, but I've been in property management for approximately 30 years. I own many properties, including I would say, similar income strata in Eugene. I own, I have about 58 doors at that property.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Yes? All right, thank you. Are there any?
Certainly, thank you.
Okay, are there any opponents? No? All right. Then I'm going to close public input. And commission discussion. We have questions, concerns?
I have a question. If this is changed from a motel to an apartment complex, then the lodging tax that you mentioned would go away. Right?
Yeah.
Do you just have an idea of how much?
Yeah, last year I paid $15,800 in lodging tax for the whole year.
Is there any other tax implications that would compensate for that in any way? Chad? No, we would just lose that revenue.
Yes.
Property might go up in value. No. Other questions? Any comments from the commissioners? Yeah, Terry.
I like the project. I'm taking it on face value. I know nothing about this person. I really wish he had been here so we could talk to him, look him in the eye and size him up. Who knows? So we're kind of taking this on face value. I'd like to see it fixed up. I'd like all this stuff to happen. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But I remember once before somebody didn't show up and we didn't like it, but I don't have a problem with it based on what I'm being told. But I'll take it on face value.
So if we approve this, does it lose, is it currently status motel?
Yes,
So if we approve this for full-time living, does that status go away on the zoning or does it maintain dual status?
It's zone C2. It will stay zone C2. This
And so the
is,
usage can go flip-flop, whatever we do.
it's a conditional usage at this time
Conditional use.
For apartments.
for apartments.
Right.
So we will,
If it changes, the only thing you change back to is something that's allowed in C2 without them coming back to us.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, anything else, Dawn? Anything?
Nope.
Sharon? There's no trees there, Sharon. It's pretty much all. Hey. Do I have a motion?
Page
Oh.
15.
15, get your choices.
There's a summary conclusion, motion options, and conditions of approval.
I move to approve the conditional use permit based on the findings in this report.
John has moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Sharon has second. The motion is to approve the conditional use permit based on the findings in this report with conditions of approval as may be modified by the commission. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. I forgot to vote. Okay, we have no unfinished business, we have no new business. Do we have any concerns of the commission? Hearing nothing else, the meeting is adjourned at 8:25. Bye, Terry.
We could debate whether Maui has better pieces of here.
I was
They're pretty nice, but ours are pretty nice too.
I was afraid he was gonna take off before I got the words out of my mouth.
My daughter, my
Russ,